Hey, what's up?
Hello.
How goes it? It's live and in the flesh is what we are today. I'm of course Mike, hanging out here on the Googles with Tim.
Tim, resident fancy boy.
That's right. We're doing something a little special here on the Gonzilla land. We decided, and we've been talking about doing a retrospective of a movie series, and it just so happens that Godzilla, a new version of it, one that does not look wussified, thank you Roland Emmerich and Matthew Broderick, and Hank Azaria too, for that turd of a movie. They're restarting it. It's coming out May 16th. The new Godzilla. I'm excited about it. Tim, are you excited about it?
When I think about it, I do this.
Perfect. So we decided why not revisit the entire filmography of Godzilla. Now you may be wondering, oh well, that's probably like 10. No, it's about 28 movies.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. So we're gonna try to squeeze it in, do a weekly Epidose via the Hangouts, and we're going to kind of go through, hopefully do 3 movies each Epidose. We'll probably do a weekly thing, or more than weekly if we need to. I, of course, have my Monster Energy drink ready to drink, aptly.
I have this.
Ah! So, we are ready to rock. And today we're going to talk about the first 3 Godzilla movies. Very interesting. It starts out with the classic Godzilla, or Gojira. It rolls into the next year. Godzilla raids again. And then it rounds out nicely with King Kong versus Godzilla. Yep, the fight that you never would have thought would happen actually happened early on in Godzilla's career. So, let's get started. Tim, I've seen Godzilla, like, the original one, like, at least 5 times. Like, how many have you seen? Was this your first showing of it?
No, I've seen them on and off. I've seen more of the goofier color ones throughout the years, like that one back when you just had. Guess I can do this now. Back when I was a kid, and you just had Works, and you had VHF and UHF, and a lot of those Saturdays and Sundays they would show the old Godzilla movies. And I remember it was always him versus Mothra or him versus whoever. I didn't ever see the black and white one until I've seen that. I've seen it in a film class in college, and I saw it again now. I hadn't seen Godzilla Raids again. I don't know that I ever saw Godzilla versus King Kong, although I'm sorry I haven't seen that one. I enjoyed it.
Well, yeah, I remember as a kid at my grandparents' house in Great Bend, Kansas, watching Godzilla and Gamera movies in the basement while the folks were visiting upstairs. It was more of a retreat from family stuff, but also as a little kid, and monsters are cool. So I remember watching that. I watched it again in the theater a couple months ago, and it just keeps coming. I mean, the original one is a classic, of course. I had never seen Godzilla Raids Again. But I have seen King Kong versus Godzilla, and I would always get angry because King Kong. Well, we'll save that when we get to it. So the first one.
Put a pin in that one.
Mm-hmm. So the first one, Gojira. What'd you think of it?
Way more serious than I remembered it. It's played pretty straightforward, like almost like a horror movie. kind of.
It was, I think, and this is not a slight, but I think, especially since the bomb dropped in Japan, despair is done perfectly by Japanese media. Nobody does despair better than the Japanese, and it's a complete reflection in this movie. When did the bomb drop? It was not even like 10
40,
years.
44 maybe.
And this came out in '52, so it hadn't even been
10 years since they'd had two cities annihilated from their surface.
Actually, this came out in '54, so it was about 10 years.
About 10, even then, that's 10 years from two cities in your country being completely annihilated.
Yeah. So first of all, to come up with that takes a lot of guts. That's like, okay, so United Whatever was a movie that came out almost 10 years after 9/11, so I could see that. So I guess it translated well to that. Some kind of natural tragedy like that.
Yeah, but like United...
I forgot the number.
Yeah, the United Flight Number movie. They didn't change the plane to a giant lizard.
That's true.
If this had been like The Bomb and they did or it was like the movie Hiroshima.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be different. But this is like, okay, let's do this movie about a horrible thing happening to our cities, but let's not go the bomb route because that's a little sour. Let's giant lizard from The Bomb.
Yes, exactly. And they tiptoed around science, but they I think it harkens back in the time in movies and in media and in entertainment where all you had to say was that you're a scientist and you were the authority in the room, and that's what happened here. They had one kook guy who's like, we need to study this animal. We can't kill it, and everybody else wants to kill it. And it's so funny because it's like we don't see that anymore. Now the scientists are the ones that are like the evil guys or whatever.
Well, they had the evil scientists then too, but this is like the first time I can think in a movie, probably in the '50s, where you have like a conservation theme.
Well,
you can't kill it. Don't kill him, even though they do a pretty piss poor job of killing him.
Yeah.
Stuff that'll stop him. No, it didn't. Sorry, wrong.
Well, that opens up into historically for people who haven't seen Godzilla movies. Historically, it's always been, at least in most of the movies, and we'll get through some of the rough years. But most of it is some shoddy backstory involving human beings that nobody really cares about, and all you're doing is waiting to get to the monster battles.
I was gonna bring this up. For the movie being called Godzilla, he's in it for like 5 minutes.
I know, exactly right. So, but that's why I wanted to bring that up.
I think the guy who had to wear the suit and run over the models late to the set or something. They really didn't. It was a lot of them running around talking.
Well, yeah.
There was a car chase, and I think there's a car chase, or I might be mixing up things. I've watched a lot of Japanese movies now.
Well, I'd be willing to forgive it for this being the first one, only because the writing is so well for it. They do a really good job of conveying not only the emotion that people were going through, but also how the leaders were struggling. Well, this is probably the most libertarian monster movie I've ever seen either, because at every point they're just like, the government keeps bickering and arguing, and then they turn around and the government keeps making these bombs, the government keeps blowing things up, the government pretty much messes up every decision, and that's why we have this monster on our planet. It's like they're thumbing their nose at not only the Japanese but the American and all the governments of the world and the politicians, especially the politicians. They're thumbing their nose at the politicians because they're the ones that led to these decisions, that led to these bombs, that led to these monster creations. That's a funny little undertone on that. But the writing, the couple, the military guy, the military guy.
Sorry, if you're gonna do Godzilla, you periodically have to have a roar of some kind. So
that's correct. But the military guy and the lady friend that he was with, and then the lady friend who had that relationship with the eye patch scientist was
Boyfriend or was
awesome.
it her brother?
I think it was either brother. I think it was a brother.
Let me let me go to my digital analog. My here.
I think it was her brother because he showed her like what ended up being Godzilla's demise. In
The
the middle of the
Oxygen
movie.
Destroyer.
Yeah, but the interplay between that from the beginning, like through half the movie, you're led to believe that this eye patch guy was the evil bastard. He's like the creepy one, and then it just totally reverses itself and punches you in the gut at the end. The way that the way that the secret was revealed of the oxygen destroyer, right? And the way that the scientist guy, the patch guy, who was kept to himself, he was an introvert, he was brooding, he was really had an internal struggle of whether or not to release this out to the world, you know, and again, to thumb the nose at the politicians, he's like, listen, if this gets known, that means that governments can use this as a weapon, and then they'll come for me and use this as a weapon. And it does a little bit of foreshadowing about how he's got to eat a bullet to make sure that it doesn't get out.
Well, he can't just destroy his notes because he'll still know how to do it.
Yeah, so it's like at least through the half the movie, you think this guy is just a real creep, and then it just turns around and just punches you right in the gut. It's like, oh no, this guy like accidentally, you know, stumbled upon this it's an allegory toward the actual bomb that dropped on him. This like weapon of mass destruction. We're gonna be using that phrase a lot in this series.
You can't. I've developed this new science, and I really can't. It'll be horrible if everybody knows it. And I don't know. I mean, we could save the monster, but is it worth putting that information out there that this exists?
Yeah, so it's obviously right along the lines of what the atomic bomb was.
And oddly enough, they didn't think of dropping an atomic bomb on him.
No, they didn't. I think they did.
I think they talked about it, but because he was radioactive, it wasn't going to do anything to him. Godzilla's pretty, as far as giant monsters goes, he's pretty invulnerable.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, he's not unbeatable, but you really got to bring your A game, or he's going to just keep going. You're just going to piss him off.
So that leads to like Godzilla the monster itself, right? Like there's all this the human struggle. It's like here's the story, yada yada.
It's great. The writing's all right. This is a decent movie. Let's get to it.
Yeah, Godzilla is in this thing for 5 minutes. What happened?
That's what we're waiting for.
Oh, and the story, the theme song and the roar at the beginning was just perfect too. But
keep getting that roar with no Godzilla. It is the biggest tease. You don't talk about a slow burn. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
You know the rubber suit was high budget, so.
Yeah, well, and they started out the classic cliches. You know, he's walking through he's stomping on things. You know, he's melting electric wires with his radioactive breath.
The only problem is you kind of been waiting for it so long, you kind of root for him to do it.
Well, I mean, and that speaks to the whole series because this was like a monster movie. This is a terrible menace.
Maybe the first time you saw it, you didn't have no concept of Godzilla. It would be different, but because we know what Godzilla is, it's like I'm waiting to see the big guy step on some trains and eat some wires. And
Yeah, well, that's what made this first one so much more different than the others. This was like the Casablanca of Godzilla movies. This was like the.
It's a well done creature feature movie for that time frame. So.
Well, and they do a great job of like lecturing you about the problem of atomic bombs and atomic waste and all this stuff about how nature, you know, will come back in a vengeance, and it really sets the tone. So Godzilla comes, he attacks a town, he crunches some cities, he crunches some iconic Japanese building.
The other catch was like we'll get to this part anyway, but at some point they say, how do we know he's even the only one?
Yeah.
Because he came from a deep crevice down in the ocean floor, and like, there could be a bunch of them. He didn't just.
Yeah. Yeah, and and I don't know if they thought of it at the time, but that was a perfect way to lead into the sequels.
And then here's a philosophical question. So regardless if it's Godzilla, because spoiler alert, he dies at the end of Godzilla. There's a Godzilla. Obviously, there's 28 more movies. Now I don't know if the next Godzilla continues on through several movies, but is like the next one of his kind, they just call him Godzilla just because there's nothing else to call him. Like
I think it's pretty much
Godzilla 2.
Yeah.
Like when you have a dog die and you get it in dog.
Well, we'll get into the '90s films, and some of that gets addressed. So
we get to the second one, I'll have a little more say on that. But Godzilla dies at the end of Godzilla, and yet there's more Godzillas, so we'll get to that.
Yeah. Well, and that's how and how he dies is kind of anticlimactic, actually. You'd think it'd be a giant fight or anything, but all right. So the guy, the sister was promised not to like tell somebody this, but she broke her promise, and you know how Japanese are with pride and honor. She was all tore up about it, but she told the military like love interest, and they're like, oh, well, then let's just melt this thing, they go knock down the door, and the guy's like, I can't do this, and for the reasons that we talked about earlier. And finally, they cut to this scene, and there was a couple scenes like this thrown across, but they cut to this scene where there's like this whole room full of children singing a song about like what has happened and try to keep spirits up. It's so moving for the scientist guy. He's like, you know what, this is beyond me, this is like, I have to save these people. Now that said, earlier in the movie there was also one of those gut-wrenching scenes where they had like, the aftermath of people huddled in an emergency shelter, after the destruction of the town, and babies crying, people can't find people, and it's just like boom, it just wears on your face. So it led up great into like the scientist is saying, all right, I'm going to use the oxygen destroyer. It burns all the notes, and they go hop on a boat, and they go to try to find Godzilla. They find Godzilla, and they have to like do a diving suit down into where Godzilla is at and melt him. And it's like this creepy scientist guy, and it's like the boyfriend, and he foreshadowed it before. Lo and behold, he drops the oxygen destroyer down there, melts Godzilla. Godzilla's just hanging out, right? It's almost like he's on the toilet. He's like on the toilet. He's like going out like he was on the toilet. He was like taking a dump, and all of a sudden, like he gets melted. He wasn't even like doing anything.
He was just like Godzilla. When left alone, will just wander back into the ocean and kind of like hang out. And so they get him out in the ocean, and they're like, okay, let's melt him. And
I think that was one of the things. Was like the nuclear reactors in Japan like attracted Godzilla, and that's why it kept coming to shore and stuff like that. It played great for the environmentalism and things like that. It was just easy to play on.
I also was struck by, I forgot that that even in the 50s they were still using those old timey diving suits.
Yeah, right.
Like the villain diving suits.
So the big twist at the end is that the scientist guy stays down there because he's gonna kill himself.
That's his oxygen cord.
Yeah, so he cuts it, and he cuts the oxygen cord
because they could pull him back up otherwise, because he's hooked. Yeah. Those suits, they had to pump. They hooked you on a hose, and they just fed you down to the bottom, and they pump air into your suit.
Mm-hmm.
And the boyfriend comes back up, and they're going to wheel up old Eye Patch. And Eye Patch cuts his oxygen tube after he knows that it's going to cook Godzilla on the bottom.
Yeah, and then everybody salutes him, and that's the end of the movie. So
yeah. And you get one of these at the end, too.
That's right.
Sorry, this is a double roar. It's kind of like the exit and entrance music for these movies.
Mm-hmm. So that's the first Godzilla. Did you watch the English version or the Japanese version? The original version.
Godzilla? I watched the Japanese dubbed version.
Okay, all right.
Not
it had subtitles.
Subtitles, excuse me. I watched this. I'm watching the pure Japanese version.
Yeah, because the American version had was it George Orwell? No, it had Raymond Burr.
Was it Raymond Burr or was it George Orwell? Not George Orwell. That's wrong. Who is the guy who did War of the Worlds?
Uh,
Oh, he did the ads for frozen peas and wine and God, what was his name?
Raymond Burr. It was
No.
Raymond Burr.
That wasn't Raymond Burr. That was
No, there was an American version called Godzilla King of the Monsters,
and it was Raymond Burr.
and they re-edited it. And
With a
they
couple
had American-made footage of Raymond Burr as American reporter covering the monsters' activities.
I was going to try to say it was the guy who was in.
Who would explain action for the English-speaking audience with minimal dubbing. So, yeah.
I was thinking it was. Oh, what's that guy's name? It's going to kill me. Citizen Kane guy.
That's not Raymond Burr.
No, that's how he's a big name. I'm just telling you.
Orson Welles?
Orson Welles, not because the other guy, the first one you said is not Orson Welles, but you just said the name, and it's the guy who wrote like 1984, George Orwell.
Yeah.
George Orwell, sci-fi writer, wrote about future stuff. I was thinking of Orson Welles, but
yeah,
it makes sense.
It's Orson Welles that says it's in Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Thank you, IMDb.
Scratch it.
So,
Makes sense. Perry, whatever his name is, the lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm really good with these references today.
They've also re-released this movie, both in 2004 and 2014, to coincide with the 50th anniversary, and then of course coinciding with the new Godzilla movie that's coming out here soon. It's the start of a franchise, but it's not what you think would be a start of a franchise, because it was so serious, and because it was like such a downer. That movie was a major buzzkill.
It was not a happy film. I mean, it was a monster film.
So leave it to Toho, which, by the way, Toho Limited, was a studio that did this in Japan. They're the ones that did this, and kudos to them. But Toho, being the enterprising young startup filmmaking community, decided the next year, let's just go ahead and cash in on this popularity, because the original Godzilla was super popular. So the next year they came out with a movie called Godzilla Raids Again.
And that was the one that they kind of set up by saying, how do we know he's the only...
Yeah, and I don't even know if they thought of it at the time, but it was such a great way to lead into it.
Because I was like, there's no way it's the same one, because they show his little skeleton dissolving in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Not little skeleton, I guess his giant skeleton. So
yeah. All right, so
it was a
yeah. So Godzilla Raids Again. What do you think of that movie?
I thought it was the same theme as the first one. There, you still had, and we'll get to this in a little bit when we just talk about the plot. But you have the whole I gotta do a little suicide thing to save other people. They introduced another monster in this one. I think it was Anguillus. Anguillus. I made a note, but I couldn't remember how they said it.
They explained. So, they tiptoed around science for that one too.
They tiptoe around a lot of science in this.
Yeah.
But there's a guy stranded on an island. He sees a Godzilla. I'm gonna call it a Godzilla because maybe I guess there's a lot. Then this is the first time you say, oh, there's another giant monster from.
Yeah, because
for whatever reason, there's another giant monster.
And they're fighting each other. So she's like Anguillus and Godzilla fight for a bit.
And they reference the oxygen destroyer. I'm just looking to see if I put any other thematic notes here. There's a little bit of a musical interlude.
Oh, God.
There's a whole subplot with prison escapees and
Yeah, I think that was
There's a
just
whole
a
side story, just like the first movie, where you're like, okay, let's get to those two monsters fighting.
yeah, but it was a lot worse. It was, I mean,
It was a lot
with
less
the
clear.
first one, it was like some serious stuff because it had actual impact to the resolution of the story. Like the guys in this movie, which I think they either run like a fishing company, whatever, and they just fly a bunch of planes or whatever. Who I don't care about these people at all. I
No,
didn't care about them at all.
I never got what the guys in the planes were doing for the fishing company. If they were just checking the water.
Yeah, I don't know,
Fishing
but
boats, I get it, they're out fishing. That makes sense.
they,
But
they tried the same, a couple in love and then like some other guy like
and then the goofy friend is the guy who ends up killing himself to try to. He
he was
flies.
a dumbass. I
He
mean, I
flies
hated
through
that.
all of ice to try to help bury Godzilla in the ice. But
He was like, I'm just gonna buzz him over and over again in my little like prop plane because that's really
gotta
cool.
stop him. You know.
He deserved to die, really.
He was really, yeah, he kind of flew by the seat of his pants. The other thing I noticed was in this one when they have the maps up for Godzilla, they have
hand
like
piece. They had a hand piece of Godzilla.
they have a little miniature Godzilla on their maps.
Yeah. I put down that it was a Settlers of Catan piece.
That's exactly what I wrote in my notes. I said it's like a Godzilla piece if he was in Catan.
I know, it was amazing.
I'm like, well, I guess if you're gonna have the little maps and move the strategic pieces around, it might as well look like a giant lizard that's coming together.
Yeah, I know, right?
Well, in case you were wondering, the giant lizard piece represents Godzilla.
Yeah, exactly. We painted it green. This movie, they
It was a little slower than the first one. A little slower.
well, and like you mentioned the prison break-in scene, it was just a contrived way to get to Godzilla to come back to the island.
Well, because they were dodging them by turning all their lights off because the lights attracted them. So
And then the scientist guy from the first movie was like, he showed up for like 2 minutes in this movie. Good for him. He didn't need to be in the whole thing. And he's like, he's attracted to light. Let's do a light bomb. And like drops Mike and he's out. He's like, peace. So that's what they do. They do a light bulb. It works, right? But then like they shut down the whole city and it's dark. And of course, prisoners are being transported at that most opportune time.
When they get out.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, all right, it's a good time to break out. So they do it, and then they happen to run into like an oil refinery plant.
They start a giant fire.
They start a humongous fire, and Godzilla comes back to shore and wreaks havoc.
My note actually says, prisoners escape truck wreck, blow up, big light, back he comes.
Yeah.
And then, and Helas too comes back. So.
Yes. So they
And what is Helas anyway? What does he kind of look like?
He's based off an Ankylosaurus. The doctor guy. That's the other thing the doctor guy explains away.
That's right.
He's a mutated form of an Ankylosaurus.
He whips out the books. That's right.
And it's like a tale that they keep talking up this thing. It's like, yeah, this kind of a badass here. He can really mess you up,
He might be able to stop Godzilla.
Yeah, see? So
I don't quite get how your solution to the problem of giant monster is to unleash another giant monster into the same.
Well, we'll get to King Kong versus Godzilla here shortly.
This is the seeds for what the King Kong plan is called. They call this the Anhylas plan, and they used it with.
Run the Anhylas plan. Anhylas. So one of the things I noticed about the fighting, and this is just, I've never seen this before. I'm used to kind of fighting. I've seen, King Kong versus Godzilla in the later movies, Mechagodzilla,
Awesome.
King Ghidorah, stuff like that.
That fighting's awesome.
This fighting, it was like they sped up the camera. It was like they made it look like they were fighting really fast, and it looked like it was just people holding up two dolls brushing against each other.
It was like little kid fighting with.
Yeah. Which it was like, I understand. I at first I was like, cool, they're like fighting really fast, but then I noticed that they just sped up the camera, and then I was like, no, thank you.
It was kind of like this. Let me just. Like that. A little.
I'm glad we're doing this in video form because if people heard that in audio, they'd think you'd be doing something else.
No, you just do. I'm Gojira and I'm Anhilus, and this is how we fight. Brr, brr.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, yeah. So, but outside of like the crappy fighting, it did establish some things that ended up being canon for the Godzilla series. Like one of it, of course, was introduction of new monsters like Anguillus. They also showed how Godzilla swam. I don't know who came up with the idea to make it look like it was a shark fin coming out of the water when he swam, but that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah,
Um,
you see him coming, which is awesome.
yeah, yeah. So that was pretty cool. Um, what else? Oh, there's some other things. Oh, they don't really allude to it, but that had to be like Monster Island, which was like
yeah,
the go-to place for all the monsters. Of course, was Monster Island, which I don't think they ever explained why all the monsters are attracted there or not. But who cares? It's especially once we get on later, it doesn't really matter anyway.
Just for the sake of
Nice.
So there's Anhilus right there, and he kind of has. That's a later Anhilus. The one in this one was black and white, but that's who you're dealing with.
It almost kind of looks like a guy's on all fours. Anyway.
Oddly enough, it kind of looks like there's a person in each of those suits. So,
Yeah,
I'm not trying to ruin the movie magic, but.
Yeah. So, and they completely foreshadowed the dunce getting it in the end when he left his little black book behind, and it was all like, oh. He's got a secret love. I'm emotionally attached to this guy all of a sudden.
Look, let's make him sympathetic real quick. Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Oh, his name is Kobayashi. Kobayashi dies trying to stop Godzilla 2. I put G2 for him.
G2.
And the plan with that is to get him on one spot and then I guess bury him under a bunch of ice. So.
Yeah. So they do a lot of hemming and hawing. Godzilla attacks again. We get a decent fight scene.
There's some. They do a flip that was like the biggest move they had.
Yeah. The backstory again dealt with some wedding or some party. The backstory is forget the back. Yeah, I'm done with the backstory. All right, let's get to what happened to Godzilla, right? So, because that's all that matters.
They were to an island.
But we'll.
I don't remember what they. To be honest, I don't remember what they did with Anhilus, but I just know that Godzilla.
Oh no! They fought, and then Godzilla bit the neck of Anguillus and dumped him in the water.
That's right, and he sank.
Yeah. So I don't know if Anguillus is actually dead though. This is what's awesome. Another great thing about the water is like it's such a mystery for these monsters anyway.
Nobody goes to look.
If they go in the water, you assume that they're dead. You assume that they're gone, but it's a great way to retcon it so they can come back out of the ocean all like better. So they dump the body and
he whooped his butt, throws him in the ocean.
Put some cement bricks on him and some brick shoes on him and dumped them in the ocean.
And Godzilla runs around underneath the water all the time, but
and swims.
We don't know about Anhilus. Anhilus, he just dumps him out in the water, and then it's time to face Godzilla again with the. I think that's when Kobayashi grows a pair and decides he's going to save everybody.
Yeah. So they decide, all right, we're going to bomb the hell out of what? Not Godzilla. They were going to bomb the exit.
They were going to get him
trap him in.
They're going to cavern and then box him in.
Right?
Nice.
So the guy kills himself trying to like slow him down, and it was just enough to where like the boats can roll out these oil barrels and start a fire that Godzilla can't walk through. And then like they start bombing, but nothing really is happening, And then the guy kills himself. And I think that's what happens is the guy starts this process where it creates an avalanche on the Godzilla, and they're like, oh, all right, he's on this frozen island, and there's ice all around him. Let's bury him. So they they call an audible in the middle of their operation, and they're like, bury him in ice to preserve him. So
there's a little. I'm just borrowing it from.
Oh no! Yeah, it's great.
There he is. He's getting buried. Oh, wait a minute. There's Anhilus a little bit there.
Yeah. So
some screenshots from the film that you may or may not interest you. But.
Yeah. So,
Hey,
they start to bury Godzilla pretty much. He gets out a little bit. Ooh, I'm scared.
he
Then
starts
double
giving up
back.
guys because they didn't do a good enough job, like they always do. Uh,
Yeah. But yeah. So they bury him in ice, and that's about it. That's the end of the
they
movie.
get him covered in ice, and then I guess that's good enough. I guess since he's a lizard, he just slows down, and that's it.
Yeah, he's just like iced and boxed in the end of the movie.
The end
And
goes in, and then you get it's.
and it's obvious. It was obvious that they cashed in on it because I mean I didn't care about the people at all. There wasn't any real sense of despair. I think the only people that died were like the airplane guy and then like the criminals like from the subway because I think the subway got flooded or something. And there was some city destruction. I think the big thing out of this was that a new monster showed up, so it opened the door for that at least. But
Yeah, just
yeah,
because as you get to the end, you get that again. That's
yeah. So that's about it. I can't really say anything else about it. There wasn't any real sense of loss.
it. Just moved it along and said, "Here's other monsters. This is what
Yeah, it wasn't much self-sacrifice. He didn't have the kind of gut punch he had in the other movie.
you're supposed to feel bad
Um,
for the guy who flew the plane in, but he was kind of an idiot. So
well, and it was fake tension. They didn't really like. It wasn't really
there's
anything.
no reason he had to do that. They could have just fired another missile.
Yeah, so that's about it. It's a throwaway movie. I can understand why I haven't seen it yet. Is that it's just I don't know. I would not fast forward it, but I would. I would say if we were to rank it, I don't know if we're gonna do a big board rank of 28 movies at the end of it. Maybe just out of this week we can rank them, but I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm having fun talking about it. But this one, obviously, it wasn't that good, and it showed because it took another how long? It
Well,
took another 7 years before another Godzilla movie would be made after this. So obviously, it didn't do that well. It really didn't do that well at all.
because that was about 62, I think, for Godzilla King Kong.
Yeah.
Yep, 1962, and it's in color. The one I
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. All right. So off with this one. Raise again. Yeah. Whatever. Next.
Next movie.
All right. Now this one is King Kong versus Godzilla.
That is correct. And
Yeah. And this is where I think this is probably the most critical turn in the series.
oh, sorry, something started. That's me. Let me just kill that.
Nice.
Go
So
ahead.
this one is I think the most pivotal turn in the series ever. I think it really established what Godzilla is and what Godzilla would end up being for years on end. And I think this is what I think with this new Godzilla movie coming out in May, we might get a return back to the original Godzilla finally. But in the meantime, this movie established what Godzilla would be for the next 20 to 30 years to 40 to 50 years. And it's amazing how it got made. Let me.
What was you got some info on that? Just for a little something, just for mood.
Yeah.
There you go.
So
Which you can tell is already leaps and bounds ahead of what we just talked about.
So Willis O'Brien, an animator of the original stop-motion King Kong, around 1960, he wanted to do King Kong versus Frankenstein, where it would be Kong against a giant version of Frankenstein's monster in San Francisco. But he can never get it going, and they tried to find other monsters. It just never really happened. I think he finally signed on somewhere, and it ended up being just too much money for stop motion. Or some studios goes down or whatever. So Toho came along and they're like, hey, King Kong versus another monster. Why don't they do Godzilla, right? So they struck a deal, and man in rubber suit is a lot cheaper than stop motion animation. So it made perfect sense, and it was a perfect marriage. And that's how they decided to make the movie. It took a while. For another Godzilla to get made, but it's strange how that kind of scenario led to this movie. Now, I've seen this movie once or twice. I rooted on Godzilla every time in this movie.
Well, you
Uh,
have, you know.
yeah. So, so yeah, it's one of my most bittersweet Godzilla movies. Have you seen this one before, Tim? What do you think of this movie?
I don't think I actually saw this one. I've seen a lot of Godzilla versus other things, and it's been a long time since I've seen any of them. I didn't even remember this was in color. I was thinking it was black and white still, but
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think we got a good. I think we got a good taste of that.
yeah, I'm just gonna kill that there. There you go. There's just a little bit of them hopping around.
Yeah.
Also to show you that it looks like, I mean, to a certain extent, it was. There's some aspects that looked a little cheaper, but there's some aspects that looked a little nicer. Like it was pretty good film stock. Colors are pretty nice. There was a lot of comedy in this one, which was good.
Yeah, and that's the thing that really was a turning point for me is that I think this one really catered toward the children, and I think you're gonna get that a lot more in the next couple of years. You're gonna get some corny stuff. The guy that was running the show advertising wise for the pharmaceutical company.
I thought that was an odd choice for the plot. I mean, it was fine, it worked, but it's like the pharmacy company's they decide they need to get a giant monkey
monster
to
be their spokesperson.
So spokesperson implies like they make a deal with him to be like, I like, Tokyo Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly.
But really, they're just gonna go let King Kong loose, and they're like, hey, look,
buy our drugs. I think they came up with pharmaceuticals and they needed to figure out some way to actually drug King Kong to bring him back to Tokyo.
They use the magic berry that makes him go to sleep.
Yeah, that's what it was. Because they had some other guy showed up with a jar full of berries and were like, this is only on this island, and there's a giant monster there, by the way.
Godzilla. King Kong has a taste for it because he takes their barrels of it and like downs it like a shot.
Exactly.
And they play drums and he takes a nap.
Like, go to bed, King Kong. You're drunk.
Well, the island people are like, oh, he drank the stuff. Let's do our dance and our drum stuff, and he'll go to sleep. And then,
what did you? Oh, go ahead.
No, but then it's like he must be a really heavy sleeper because they managed to like build a giant raft and start hauling him back to Tokyo, and he's still asleep.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's like, let's just do it, okay?
Don't worry about planning or anything. We'll just put him on a raft, and we'll kind of put some.
How they lift them up, how they get to build the raft in a quick time, how do they know he'd still be asleep? They just threw all that out the window. Not only did they tiptoe around science, they also kicked it in the pants.
Well, they tiptoed around science. They obviously were tiptoeing around King Kong because they didn't want to wake him up.
Oh man. Yeah. What did you think of the American submarine?
I have a guess that perhaps some of those gentlemen weren't American. I don't know what national. I'm going to go with. They could. Well, dare I say German, but they might have been Swedish. They were not. I don't think they were American, or maybe because the Japanese people were doing the dubbing, or actually they weren't doing the. Well, actually, their voices weren't American. They were putting Japanese subtitles up.
Yeah, I know, right?
But
it was English speaking. We know.
It was English speaking, but whether or not the people in the scene were speaking English was a different matter. They may have been speaking broken English, and those poor saps, they're just like hauling around up in the Arctic or the subarctic. I'm not sure where they were, and they drive like right into an iceberg, looking because there's glowy stuff coming from an iceberg, and they just plow right into it.
Yeah. And well, yeah, exactly, right? They like find radiation and then they head there and it's like, we
hit the ice that we were driving towards.
And we also woke up Godzilla. So
there's something else there, and every time they're like, okay, well, we're just gonna have to we'll have to do this one maneuver. Like, oh, we can't, our ship's broken. Okay, we'll just abandon the ship, I guess. Let's go out the emergency hatch. Emergency hatch is blocked. It's like, I guess we'll just send up our yellow SOS gas. So
I know, right? So that's how Godzilla woke up. Some dumb American submarine, poorly accented, poorly acting. Which, by the way, I wonder if that's what Japanese people think that Japanese actors in America that speak Japanese are like when they hear them speak in English movies.
Well, it's a little bit. If you read the subtitles, occasionally there's a little translation problem because the right word is. It's close. It's really close, but sometimes there's a word that's just not quite right for what they're saying. Like they probably meant scary and not sunny, you know. But I don't know that they woke him up. I think he was in there trying to. I think he was in there kind of breathing fire, trying to get out.
Well, I don't know.
That's my own theory. I thought the glowing was him like in there blowing his fire breath.
So they went up there and they checked it out, and then they just like helped accelerate the process.
Well, they cracked into it, so they didn't slow the process down. They just drove right into it, and then he got out and set their boat on fire, and that was the end for them.
Yeah.
For them. That was the
end. So that's how the stage is set, right? Like Godzilla wakes up thanks to American submarines, or Godzilla wakes up with the help of American submarines. Meanwhile,
again, it was the Americans' fault that Godzilla showed up.
Exactly, and then at the same time, a pharmaceutical company is lugging a gorilla they stole from an island of Asian people in blackface.
That was
back to Japan.
I had the note too. It's a bunch of Japanese people in afro wigs and blackface.
Yes. So
and we're talking like classic, like jungle savage racist,
well, I don't know if it's actually like how the culture was at the time and the location that they were. I don't know if it's racist
stuff. I'm sure it's no worse than the King Kong one that was the original King Kong thing, but
yeah. So I wouldn't really label it racist. As more like trying to act around what the environment was that they were in at the time.
They weren't going to go get a bunch of like a real tribe to be in the movie, but it is funny to see a whole other culture do instead of actually putting black people in the movie in that time frame, they just go ahead and pick up their main culture and put wigs on them.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It was funny. I got a chuckle out of it, but it wasn't like they made them look stupid. They were just supposed to be, what do you call it? Not rural. It's not the right term. They're supposed to be like an island tribe that hasn't seen a lot of modern stuff because they like give them radio and cigarettes to like get King Kong.
So the one of the things that happened in this movie that I liked a lot is that finally I got to hear the really emphatic, "It's Godzilla." So I thought that was cool.
It was from an American though.
Yeah, I know, right? It was awesome.
From an American helicopter pilot.
And then King Kong got a warm-up fight between a giant octopus, which I thought was pretty interesting. I wasn't expecting a giant octopus. They saw the thing sliding in. It was kind of gross. I think they were a little overzealous. I think the sound guy was a little overzealous on the squishy sounds with the octopus too.
Well, not to be a spoiler, but there may be a movie I'm picking for the Gonzo Guys podcast that will touch on.
Squishiness.
Well, there's an octopus element to something I think I'm going to select, and the Japanese have a very special relationship with octopi. But aside from that, he does fight with the octopus, but when these two guys who are not qualified, as best I can tell, to be going to an island, they work in an ad agency.
I know.
They work in marketing at the pharmacy company, and they send them out with like safari gear to go catch like a 900-foot gorilla. And
a couple of rifles.
And 2 rifles, because that'll stop them. But I love that the chief of the tribe tells him, he's like, well, all right, he's finally cool with them. They give him a radio and some cigarettes, and they give a kid a cigarette too, which is interesting.
Yeah, they gave a kid a smoke. I thought that was awesome.
They at least said, don't tell your mom we gave you these. But they're all smoking cigarettes. They give him a radio, which apparently goes over big. And he's like, okay, you can stay for the night, but we're not responsible if our God eats you.
That seems reasonable.
Which is reasonable, but I'm kind of wondering why they got on board with them hauling their god away on a raft. But they didn't cover that. I'm gonna assume they gave more radios and cigarettes, and that was fine. They're like, okay, deal.
Well, and then Godzilla woke up on the raft, and they're like, let's blow it up. After the comedic pharmaceutical guy helicoptered down onto it, man alive. And then they shot it, and then boom. Blew up, and then King Kong got out of the water and stood up and was like, So you'd figure, I'm pissed off at the boat now, I'm going to go turn it over, but no. He just, shows up on the island.
Well, and then, King Kong's kind of peaceful, a little bit. He's almost a little bit peaceful.
Almost.
Almost.
So,
You can piss him off.
so there, it's leading up to. They kind of allude at it as like the pharmaceutical guy. It's like, why is Godzilla getting all this press? King Kong needs to get this press.
It turns out an E-True, like a TMZ for giant monsters. Like, this is bullshit. We're supposed
and
to.
then they're all sitting around going, I wonder what it would be like if they fought.
That's what I'm thinking too as I watch this movie. Can we get to that? But
Please.
The kicker is, and the other thing is, they totally. This is where I got a little sympathetic for Godzilla in this, because they're like, well, King Kong's a real animal, so we can't, kill him. But Godzilla's a monster.
I know, right?
I'm like, you're splitting hairs at this point, gentlemen.
Yeah. So the electrical wires stop Godzilla from coming in. Meanwhile, King Kong's on the same island, and he chews through the electrical wires.
I might know that they also
disables
thought their electrical charge was going to kill Godzilla.
Yeah.
And apparently, I'll just go the other way. Thanks. And King
Kong, fine.
And King Kong, who's an animal and who's supposedly better,
in nature, he just chews through it, and he's like, "Oh, this is delicious."
He's flossing his teeth. He's flossing the natives out of his teeth, and then he's back on. He's like, "Oh, this is a wire." Let's keep going.
So this kind of goes back to what I was thinking about with the original idea that this guy had about King Kong versus Frankenstein. I imagine they just kind of switched things around, right? If that was Frankenstein and he ate the electricity, that seemed more plausible because that's what gave him life to begin with. Was he got shocked full of lightning, right? But it's like they flip sides. King Kong now gets superpowers from electricity, and Godzilla is like the bad guy.
Well, every time he kind of came around was like during electrical storms on the island. So
yeah.
He would come out when there's a big thunderstorm. And apparently when he gets charged up with electricity, he has like electric hands.
Exactly.
Which Godzilla whoops his butt the first time. So.
Yeah, Godzilla whoops his ass the first time. They meet. They finally meet, but the fence goes down. They meet. Godzilla wins.
Godzilla just fire breath and singes his belly fur, and then he kind of burns his ass.
And King Kong's like, "The hell with this! I'm out of here." He just turns and walks away.
You kidding?
So then he finds the lady love interest, and he climbs on top of some building, just be all iconic again, and then they play drums.
It was kind of like a moderate-sized building.
Yeah.
They send up gas bombs made of the special berry stuff and gas him while he's on top of the building, and then he kind of gets sleepy and climbs down. And
they play the drums.
And then the two goofs who they send to the island who do marketing apparently also are drummers, so they just whip it out and start boom 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 boom, and that's apparently the lullaby for Godzilla or King Kong. So
they're like with the military now, and they're like, hey, Godzilla's still a pain in the butt. What are we gonna do? They're like, let's airlift Kong to him.
Let's capture King Kong and take him to him. Even though
so that's what they do, and it's cool that they had to fight on Mount Fuji. I thought that was a nice touch.
That was great. They throw him in the volcano, but
they drop Kong's ass down on the mountain. He slides right into Godzilla, and then it's just craziness after that.
He slid down the hill on his butt.
Yeah,
it was good.
Yeah, so they fought. Kong played possum a couple times. Kong was throwing rocks, and then Godzilla used his tail a lot, which also is important for the canon, because he uses his tail a lot in other movies. So they fight. It looks like Godzilla's gonna win.
Fire breath,
and then all of a sudden,
fire breath, rock.
Yeah, this made me think that Godzilla, we'll talk about it after this movie real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. Then all of a sudden, King Kong gets zapped with
lightning.
Lightning. Yeah, he gets zapped with lightning, and then all of a sudden he's like, "I'm super power guy."
He's got electric. He just starts, and he starts really messing with Godzilla.
Yeah, he shoves a tree in Godzilla's mouth. He just really.
That's a little rough, even for that movie. I was kind of like, "Oh, that's kind of graphic."
Yeah. So finally, it's again with the water, they fall into the water. Boom, 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 boom. You think Godzilla's down for the count, and then King Kong is up out of the water or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, hey, Kong, he's going back to his island now."
Leave
It's
them
like
alone.
exactly. So the end
Well, they did at some point. They got Godzilla and they buried him in dirt, didn't they? This time
or something. I don't know.
they
It
didn't.
doesn't matter because we'll find out how he
King
comes.
Kong's running away. He's going. He's like, screw this. I'm going back to my island where the people worship me, and I'm all right. So
Yeah. Kong goes away. I forgot what happened to Godzilla. I thought he was just underwater and he stayed underwater.
did they? They said is that the last of him? I don't think he went in the water. I think they buried him in dirt or something.
Oh well. At any rate, Godzilla was
Godzilla
done.
was taken care of for the time being.
Yeah. So this is where I started thinking, and this is 3 movies for the week, and I think we're not going to see it yet. We'll probably see it here in a couple more movies, but I'm starting to think that Godzilla is kind of like the Stone Cold Steve Austin of movie monsters, where he was like the first anti-hero, where he started out as being the evil guy, and then eventually he ended up being the good guy. So just keep that in mind.
Well, he was kind of like, at first I was like, they got King Kong to stop Godzilla in this one, but there were kind of 2 factions of people. There was like Godzilla people and King Kong people. And there's a lot of mention of side betting on the fight.
Yeah, I don't know if it was fixed. That lightning seemed a little too obvious.
I did not know King Kong got magic electric hands from getting hit by lightning.
Yeah.
It's good to know, and it helped him fight because Godzilla really had the upper hand on him there. So.
Yeah. So all right. So those are the 3 movies. How'd you rank them? I'll start. How would you rank these movies?
I think the most fun. Let me think. I'd probably go. I should say 1, 3, 2, but I think I'm gonna say 3, 1, 2.
Fair enough.
Godzilla versus King Kong, Godzilla the original, and then Godzilla Raids Again. That was just kind of an all over the place mess.
So here we go. I actually am going 1, 3, 2.
1, 3, 2. It was a toss up for me. You're like 1, 1A on those. So.
Yeah. So that's how we rank the movies. Next week, it's Mothra versus Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, and Invasion of Astro Monster.
Oh yes, I think I know. I'm pretty sure I've seen that one. That was one of the ones I remember watching in the weekend.
And this is where again I go King Kong Godzilla, and where I understand where you would put that number 1. Those set of 3 movies came out in a span of maybe a year and a half. 1964, 1964, 1965. There's 3 movies, so this is where it's like bam. And you'll start seeing it here for a while. You see a Godzilla movie pretty much come out every year. The way that King Kong and Godzilla had the formula of like, the fights, the comedic kid-like background stuff, and characters we really don't care about. I mean, you really see the tone set, and that's how I think like this movie was super pivotal. But again, Godzilla the original is number 1 for me, so I'm going to put it at that. I'm
looking forward to this next set of 3. If they're going to be like King Kong versus Godzilla, those are going to be some interesting pictures.
Now, we set the stage. We got at least 6 more weeks of this. How many other Godzilla movies have you seen? Now, I'm kind of curious.
I have seen. I think I've seen Godzilla versus Mothra. I've seen Godzilla in the Astro one. I just remember that title sticking with me. I feel like I have seen Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, if that's one.
Yeah.
And I've seen there's another one that I'm forgetting that I saw, and I only saw it at Mystery Science Theater 3000. So. Well,
we'll get into that too. There's a couple of these that have been mistied, so we'll also talk about that when we get to it.
So I've seen parts of them in as much as you can see a movie on Mystery Science Theater 3000. I've seen some there, but I know I've seen the Astro Monster, and I know I've seen Mothra.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Well, then I think we might actually be done here.
All right.
Yeah. So I think it was a pretty successful first Epidose. And and until next time. Don't fast forward, and
there we go.
Go Godzilla.
If you're gonna watch them all, you better start now.
That's right.
hip hop.